Hello, my name is Tyler Rawson, and this is my demonstration speech for public speaking. Nature's first green is gold, her hardest hue to hold. Her early leaf's a flower, but only so an hour. Then leaf subsides the leaf, and Eden falls to grief. So dawn goes down to day, nothing gold can stay. This poem by Robert Frost is a poem that deeply resonates with me as an engineering student. It reminds us that time is unending and that no matter what we do, we can't change or design for that. Everything degrades. Nothing gold can stay. And as I spend more and more time learning about the engineering design process and delving deeper into sort of my own passions and hobbies with that, I thought that I would demonstrate how I personally write a poem. And use the engineering design process to write poetry. For the last 13 years, since my grandmother gave me a Shel Silverstein novel, I have been writing poetry. Not necessarily the best poetry in the world, I'm sure, but also it's just something that I'm very passionate about and that I take a lot of time to do, especially when I'm feeling stressed or out of sync. Now, I hear a lot of you might be asking, Tyler, how on earth is poetry related to engineering? And well, I have to say, everything in this world is designed in some sense, and engineering is just the study of the process. And every brilliant poet, and every brilliant engineer has their own unique process. Now, I don't claim to be on the level of such of either, I don't claim to be a spectacular electrical engineer or a spectacular poet, but I have majored in English for a year, and I did study under a Rhodes Scholar of Poetry, and so I'll show you how I go through my process. And I'm going to do that by showing you firstly the way that I draw inspiration from my surroundings. The second way I'll do is we'll discuss how to find your own style and how I found mine, and then thirdly I'll talk a little bit about how I edit poetry and how I name poems. So, step one, drawing inspiration. Poetry, like a lot of things in the art world, is purely spiritual, or it has a lot of draw from within rather than external factors. Obviously, if you're going to write about a beautiful meadow, the meadow has to be there. But the things that you're writing about are really describing how you feel about the meadow and how the meadow affects how you see the world. And so, while these ideas are great, something that I might find really, really valuable is something that you might not have any, concern about at all. Now that makes it kind of hard to recommend how to gain inspiration from your surroundings to write great poems. But some things that I like to use is, nature, obviously, love, loss, growing up, self-reflections, and then sort of like philosophical discussions that I think further about. So to start a poem, I usually start by minimizing my surroundings. So what that means is I'll go into a room by myself. I'll take out my notebook, and I'll just start letting the words flow. I'll think about things that are beautiful to me, things that are tragic or ironic, things that might play with my heartstrings and think that might make the audience feel the same way that I'm feeling. I'll then determine how I want the poem to feel, which is kind of a strange thing to say. But the tone of a poem is generally established in the first stanza, I've found. And so if I don't like how the poem is going by the time I'm done with the first stanza, then I'll either scrap it or I'll make some changes. I don't ever throw away any of my poetry or scrap it in general, because sometimes stuff that you've written, that didn't work for that particular place in the poem come back and make more sense later in the poem or in a different poem, that sort of thing. So secondly, we're going to talk about finding your own style. So finding your own poetic style is time consuming and it's difficult, and a lot of people are going to be like, there's no structures, what are we doing? Everything is so free. But it's important to think about as somebody who enjoys poetry, whether you like writing it or reading it. And that kind of helped me narrow it down for how I want to write poetry. So I look at my favorite poets' styles, Robert Frost, Sam Taylor Coleridge, and many, many more. And I realized that I really like the couplet style, where sort of you take a collection of couplets and then you create a big, long poem from there. And then after that, you have to understand that poetry isn't like building a bridge or completing a math assignment. It's not static. It's not an art form that's like sculpture where once you've created it, it's done, right? Poetry is fluid. It's free. It's sort of airy in the sense that you can take many aspects of how each poem that you write can become a larger poem or a shorter poem or change the meaning entirely. So step 3 is failing. And I know that that's kind of a controversial step to be having in your demonstration speech. Tyler, how can failing be part of the process? But everything that you do, you're not going to be great at first, right? So I'm sure that a lot of the speech will be sloppy and unpolished and not the best way to go about making this speech, but we'll get better at it every time that we do it. And it's just like this poem. So I'll read to you now the poem that I created for this assignment. I look out there and nowhere near did I find my long-lost bear. Over mounts and under stones I look for her in light unshown. When upon the wind I hear a call, that subtle grin. Upon my face a heat was thrown, and to her arms I gently go. And together in the cold wind that blow, I hugged her close and felt at peace. For in her arms my worry ceased, for one and to another, but what on earth could ever bother? To find her anywhere, my soul would search and stumble there, and as a ship to shore, or a screw to a hole just bore, my body and my mind doth seek, like a climber to a mountain's peak, the euphoria of her soft embrace, a feeling that makes my heart slow and race. And as I bask there in her touch, I know that while it is not much, to have her rays upon my face means to be free from winter's long race. And now I hear people objecting, Tyler, you didn't fail. That was a great poem. And truthfully, I am very happy about how this poem turned out. But the first step is always getting it out on the page. So the first 3 stanzas I had pretty much as I wanted them. And then the last 3 I didn't really know what to do with, which segues right into our 4th and final step for this demonstration speech, which is editing and naming the poem. So this is the final step in my creative writing process for poetry. And I'm sure you're like, why did we save titling for the end? That doesn't really make any sense. That'd be the first thing that I would do, is title the poem that I'm trying to write. And I found that when you title a poem before you write down the actual meat and potatoes of the poem, you're not writing what you want to write, you're writing what you've been prompted to write, in a sense. It's less free, it's less spontaneous, it's more directed, and I personally struggle to get across the ideas that I'm trying to write and communicate when I have a title already. So, like I said, poems are an evolving art form, right? So if I had named this poem before I got through it, I would have maybe not had the realization that I'm not writing about a past lover or like a close family member, right? But rather I'm writing about the sun, right? And so that ambiguity would have been lost. Whereas like when you do it this way, it's not exactly black and white, like there's some room for interpretation that I think elevates the art from what could be to what should be. When you discuss poetry and paintings and stuff like that, the interpreter is always much more interesting to me than the artist's explanation. So, because of the unpredictability of poetry, like I said, I like poems that are more ambiguous. And so whether I write online or in paper, I don't ever name the poem until the very end. And so when I look back and I start to edit this poem, I think about how I can improve not only the rhyme scheme, but specific stanzas or the way that I want the ear play. I guess if that's the concept I'm trying to get off, is like the way it sounds flowing inside of your mind, and as well as the sounds of how it flows sort of through like oral speech of it. And so if I was trying to edit as I go, I wouldn't have realized in the first stanza, did I find my long lost bear actually is more it's more important. It works better with long lost care, right? I started writing it and I thought about using the word bear there to rhyme with near as a slant rhyme, sort of in like alluding to the fact that the bear could be like a motherly bear or sort of like a wild and more like druidic experience, I guess. But care makes more sense for the overall flow of the poem and the way that I think that I prefer the sort of first stanza to go in terms of how you could interpret it, how I can interpret it, and how it kind of takes the poem from that first stage of like, oh, this is probably about an ex or a grandparent who passed away or something like that, and elevates it to that sort of, oh, is he talking about the sun? Is he talking about spring? Is it about a lover? Is it about whatever, And I think that adds it. So, with all this in mind, I chose to name this poem Rays. Rays is an homage to the sun, but also as a metaphor to being in the presence of other people, right? We often say, like, someone's radiant if they're beautiful or we enjoy their presence a lot. And to bask in someone's presence is to be happy and content with them around. So, finally, to conclude this epic and long demonstration speech, I'm going to offer a brief summary of what we did together and how using processes like these can help you with your studies and your lives. Well, our first step was finding inspiration. Inspiration is like sort of a uniquely personal thing as well as an environmental thing. And so whatever you're trying to do, whether it be like writing poetry or studying engineering or doing, anything in your life, inspiration and drive is what takes things from, middle of the road to fantastic or excellent. And so if you can hone that ability to become inspired, to take things from your surroundings and from inside of you and pull them out and use them as motivation and inspiration, obviously, to do what you're doing, you're going to immediately elevate everything that you do because there's passion behind it, there's feeling behind it, and it's incredibly powerful. So, while I admit that nailing down your specific poetry style isn't particularly applicable to life outside of poetry, the process of researching and refining and understanding how to present your arguments or yourself in different ways can vastly improve how you are perceived to employers or friends or family or however you want the world to see you, right? And understanding all of this makes failing and growing a more reasonable part of taking stock of ourselves and our accomplishments. And it also pushes us hard to succeed and strive past the ways that we fall short. Yeah, thank you for listening. This has been Tyler Rawson again for Public Speaking. Thanks.